Hey Villa fam, welcome back to season 3 of Honest Conversations with Two Village Girls. I'm Serena.
And I'm Angie.
This season, we are focusing on all of the common questions we've been asked about specific child behaviors. This week, we are answering the question, why is my child crying?
Yeah, so first we're going to start by talking about basically crying it out. And what we mean by that is basically, we're not saying all the time when a child is crying, but like sometimes when a child is crying, let them cry it out. And I think we talk more from a teacher's perspective when we say crying it out because when when our children in school are crying, we let them cry it out, and then after they're done, we ask them questions like, "Why are you feeling that way?" or
Mm-hmm.
things like that will come up. So that's what we mean by crying it out.
Yeah.
Children may cry for different reasons. Maybe because they're hungry, maybe because they're tired, or maybe they just need their diaper changed, or they just might need, just want some attention from whoever's around. Anything like that, a baby could be crying.
Absolutely. And we think that from a child care perspective to an in-home perspective, we think that there's a difference between crying it out and letting your child deal with their emotions by themselves. Like Angie was saying, like we try and sit there and we give them their space to like
Mm-hmm.
express their feelings, and we don't try and stop them from crying, but we do give them the opportunity to say like, hey, I'm ready to talk, like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm here, I need someone to help me. And we think that's a little different than letting babies or toddlers cry it out, because in those situations the goal is just to get the baby to self-soothe or stop themselves from crying
Mm-hmm.
on their own and figure it out themselves. And the way we see that as different is because these are people that typically depend on adults and
Yeah.
grown-ups
Mm-hmm.
to help them navigate through their feelings, especially if it's something that they don't understand or they're experiencing for the first time. Like we try and make sure that they have that support that they need from the beginning. That way, later on, they'll figure out how to properly regulate their emotions and feelings other than like bottling it in. Which brings us into the benefits and risks of crying it out. You want to jump in, Angie?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna start with talking about parent versus the baby, and we're gonna talk about how it can be beneficial or detrimental with crying it out. So I know like a lot of times children may cry and just cry and just cry.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be frustrating to both the parent and the baby. So
Especially when you feel like you've done everything. You've
yeah.
changed them, you've cleaned them, you've fed them, burped them, like the whole nine.
Hmm. um and like it's sometimes you just like, what else is wrong with the baby? Like what else wrong with him? Why is he still crying? And like when you don't have an answer, sometimes it just become hard. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like me and Serena be saying, we always say to like take a step back or take some time. So if the baby is crying and you're frustrated to the point, that means both of you guys are frustrated. You're both under some type of stress.
Yeah.
So it would be beneficial if you just let them cry it out and finish going through their emotions that they're going through. Because I mean, I know that we supposed to, rush to a crying baby when they're crying, but it's nothing wrong with letting them, sit there and cry if you're still there, you're not far.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's a good point. It's important. This is another reason why the village is so important, because if you feel like you're stressed out, you should be
Mm-hmm.
able to like tap out or have someone around that can help you, probably like give you a different perspective, like, oh, I've done all these different things.
Yeah.
Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Like there's more options, but for like what I can only imagine is a stressed out, tired, exhausted parent,
Mm-hmm.
like those options just aren't coming as quickly because there's so much already on your mind, so much on your plate. So yeah, definitely that stress factor, that parent versus baby, it
Mm-hmm.
can be overwhelming, I imagine. One of the things that people typically use like the crying it out method for is like relief.
Mm-hmm.
They need to feel like that I've done everything I can. This is where I can just take a step back. So again, looking at that like that tap out moment where it's just like, okay, I just need a break.
Yeah.
Someone else can do this. I need the relief of just knowing that my baby's okay. I've done it. I've done what I can. I've done it right. And I'm good. Like,
Yeah.
I'm good. My baby's good. I know there's nothing wrong with them and there's nothing wrong with me. So I'm going to go sit in a bath or sit somewhere else and relax, get some relief from that frustration.
So research suggests that crying it out could lead to psychological just distress, meaning that letting a child cry it out could be like harmful. Leaving a child there alone crying may make it seem like to the child that they aren't being comforted by the parent,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the case.
It makes sense for them to feel like they are abandoned by their parent because from the beginning of their lifetime, all they really like know is the parent. Like how we talked about their first connections being like mom's nipple or like bottle feeding, like those people that typically are there to care for them, they latch onto. So when they are crying it out, like their little minds are thinking like nobody. I think what research has been showing is that like their response is like nobody cares about me, nobody's here to help me. And when they do that self-soothing factor, that's more of a psychological distress to them because they're not really soothing. They've just come to the acceptance that I'm going to have to go through this alone anyway, which is crazy to think about. Like if they're so young, like we're
Mm-hmm.
talking like infants and like children under 1, like babies. So for them to like put that together, that like, oh, like I don't have a reason to cry because no one's gonna come to my aid. Like I wonder how science, like how research figured that out. What do you think? Like what do you think about that whole process?
That's just, I don't know, that's hard to think about as a child, but
Yeah.
I don't even know how researchers would even like figure that out because observation wouldn't even like. How do you come up with what a child is thinking about? A baby is thinking about when they cry.
Yeah.
Like,
This topic is just very controversial because it's like there's so many sides to this. Like there's the parent side, the
mm-hmm.
child side, like the psychological side even.
Yeah.
Like that's its own thing because like these children, these babies, what are they really going through? Because like as an adult, like we know we need to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and say
Yeah.
like I need a break, I need to just cry.
Shoot,
But is that
not all of us, but yeah.
true? Not all of us. But the concept of crying it out, I think the biggest difference is like if there's an end to it, like giving them time to express their
Yeah.
frustration and then ending it
Mm-hmm.
is the bigger difference than just
Than like
like
letting them cry the whole day and like say forget about it.
leave them to the wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other like risk that we like noticed was like anxiety, possible anxiety.
Another risk of crying it out would be anxiety. Like Tony was saying, crying it out, like on the child from a child's perspective, can bring anxiety to them because they're just crying and crying and crying and wondering when somebody is going to come to their aid.
Mm-hmm.
But from a parent's perspective, anxiety can come from, like we were saying, not knowing what or not knowing how to stop the baby from crying at the time, or
Yeah.
I don't know, just being like so stretched out of ideas or any way to stop the baby from crying. Like even if like the parent try to comfort them for a moment and the baby still didn't stop crying,
Yeah.
like what do you do then? Like of course your anxiety gonna go up, your stress is gonna go up because you're frustrated and you're at this point probably tired.
Mm-hmm. And just confused.
Yeah.
That anxiety factor is, I want to say it's like borderline like going into like postpartum depression, like
Mm-hmm.
not
Oh,
having
that's a
those
good.
answers.
Mm-hmm.
But we are nowhere near experts on postpartum depression, so we're not even going to get into that topic.
That's a good point.
But from what I have learned, like that's one of those things that
Mm-hmm.
like leads to like, oh my gosh, like I'm over parenting, I
Yeah.
can't do it, I'm a horrible parent or whatever, which is not the case.
That's I
Still a
think
fam.
that's what parents think about first when they can't stop their child from crying. Like I'm a horrible parent. Like why don't my child like me? Am I doing it wrong or stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that? I don't think there's no wrong, right or wrong way, but
Oh no.
everybody learned once they had that baby.
Hmm.
They learn for themselves.
And letting your baby cry, even for a few minutes, like that doesn't make you a bad parent if you don't immediately
Mm-mm.
rush to their side.
Yeah.
But there are many things that just come with time and trial and error, unfortunately. But they're your babies, and you're doing an awesome job.
Absolutely.
So, when it comes to daycare centers, these are some things we do and have learned to do with like infants and tots and just like the younger age children when it comes to crying and crying it out.
Yeah. So some things we do is, yeah, of course, one thing is letting them cry it out, but I think I talk about this a lot all the time. Is like giving them just their opportunity to have that space to let them cry it out,
Mm-hmm.
and figure out just have them handle their emotions differently. Because as in a daycare center, we teach kids how to handle their emotions too, as well as other things.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we do use in the daycare is a feelings chart. We might sit them down and let them look over the feelings chart and say, "Hey Josh, look at these emotions on this feelings chart and tell me how you're feeling today, or tell me how you're feeling right now in this moment, or stuff like that." And
Yeah.
we more so communicate. We let them cry it out, then we communicate and kind of move forward from there.
Yeah. From my experience working in a center that had infants, I didn't work directly with the infants, but I worked the classroom over from the infants. So I constantly saw like the infant teachers. We'd see them just like tagging in when there's a baby that's crying and like fussy, and they've taken their nap, they've changed, they've ate, they've played,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just like trying to figure out what's going on. Like they tag in and out too
Oh,
as childcare
yeah.
providers. So it's like it's okay to take breaks and to know
Mm-hmm.
when you've had enough and you've dealt with enough. And it's no fault on your own because children are a lot, babies are a lot.
Yeah.
But we try not to let them continue crying, mostly because there's like other eyes like watching. So they're
Mm-hmm.
the like it's a team. It's a team thing when it comes to raising a child. It takes a village, of course.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you're doing a great job.
Absolutely.
Right.
So yeah, Villa fam, if you have any ideas or suggestions for the rest of the village on, crying it out. So if you guys have any thoughts or suggestions to share with the rest of the village, please share them. Help your fellow villagers out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in again to another episode with Two Village Girls. Please subscribe to our channel if you are new. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them down below. Also, go ahead and hit that bell to get notified when new videos drop. Please follow us on all our social medias, which will be listed in the description box below. And as always, we want to send you out with some positive vibes to get you through the rest of your week. This week's inspirational quote is by Muhammad Murat El Don. Sorry for the butchery, but he said, "Every time a war ends under a beautiful sun in the face of a crying child, I see a rainbow of hope over the innocent teardrops." Thanks, Villa fam. Bye.
Bye.